The clock showed 10:47 p.m. when Maria stepped out of the old bus and onto the busy downtown street. Her small frame bent slightly under the weight of her cleaning supplies bag, but her steps were steady and determined. At 67 years old, she had been making this same journey every weeknight for 3 years now. The glass towers of the business district stretched high above her, their windows glowing like scattered stars against the dark sky. Most people her age were home watching television or tucked safely in bed. But Maria had work to do. She walked through the revolving doors of global tech industries, nodding politely to the security guard who barely looked up from his newspaper. The lobby was all marble floors and expensive artwork, the kind of place that made visitors feel important just by walking through it. Maria's worn sneakers squeaked softly against the polished stone as she made her way to the service elevator. "Good evening, Mrs. Santos," called out Tony, the night security supervisor. He was one of the few people in the building who actually knew her name. "How's your daughter doing?" "She is well, thank you for asking," Maria replied with a warm smile, though her English carried the gentle accent of someone who had learned the language later in life. "The children are growing so fast." Tony smiled back. He was a good man, Maria thought, not like some of the others who worked here. The elevator carried her up to the 15th floor where the real work began. The offices of Global Tech's marketing department stretched out before her like a maze of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms. Even at this late hour, several employees were still hunched over their computers, fueled by coffee and the pressure of morning deadlines. Maria pulled on her rubber gloves and began her routine. She had perfected this dance over the years, emptying trash bins, wiping down desks, cleaning coffee rings from conference tables. Her movements were quiet and efficient, designed not to disturb the people who were still working, but being invisible had its disadvantages. "Did you see the way she just stood there staring at my computer screen?" whispered Jessica, a young marketing coordinator, to her cubicle neighbor. She spoke just loud enough for Maria to hear, though she pretended not to notice the cleaning woman nearby. "I know, right?" replied David, not bothering to lower his voice. "Sometimes I wonder if she even understands what we do here. Probably thinks we're just playing games on these things all day." The two young professionals laughed, their voices carrying across the quiet office space. Maria continued emptying David's trash bin, her face showing no reaction to their words. She had heard worse over the years. What they didn't know was that Maria understood every word perfectly. She had been listening to their conversations for months now. Complaints about difficult clients, struggles with international marketing campaigns, frustrated discussions about cultural differences in their global advertising efforts. She heard it all, processed it all, but kept her observations to herself. "Excuse me," David said, finally acknowledging her presence. He spoke slowly and loudly, the way some people talk to young children or tourists. "Could you not spray that cleaning stuff while I'm eating?" He held up his late-night sandwich and made exaggerated gestures with his hands. His colleague, Jessica, giggled at the performance. "Of course, so sorry," Maria replied softly, moving her cleaning supplies to a different area. She had learned long ago that it was easier to simply apologize and move on than to explain that she had been carefully avoiding his workspace until he finished eating. This was her world now. A world where her broken English made people assume broken thoughts, where her age and appearance rendered her practically invisible to most of the building's occupants, where young people making a fraction of her former salary looked down on her as if she were somehow less intelligent, less valuable, less human. But Maria had secrets that these young professionals could never imagine. As she worked her way through the cubicles, she couldn't help but overhear a heated phone conversation taking place in one of the glass offices. Brad, a junior executive, was pacing behind his desk, his voice rising with frustration. No, that's not what we meant at all," he was saying into his headset. "The German clients are completely misunderstanding our proposal. We need someone who actually speaks their language, not just some translation app." Maria paused in her cleaning, her trained ear picking up the nuances of the conversation. She had heard similar discussions many times before. Global Tech was a growing international company, but they often struggled with communication barriers when dealing with overseas partners and clients. "I don't care how much it costs," Brad continued. "Find me a real translator who understands German business culture. This deal is worth millions and we're about to lose it because of a language problem." He slammed down the phone and slumped into his chair, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Maria quietly continued her work around his office, but her mind was processing everything she had just heard. German business culture. She knew it well. Better than most native speakers, actually. But to Brad and everyone else in this building, she was just the old cleaning lady who could barely string together a proper English sentence. The irony wasn't lost on her. As the night wore on, Maria made her way through the different departments. The sales team on the 16th floor, where smooth-talking representatives closed deals worth more money than she would see in a lifetime. The legal department on the 17th floor, where serious-looking attorneys in expensive suits worked, late into the night on complex international contracts, and everywhere she went she was treated the same way. With polite indifference at best, mild irritation at worst. Some people acknowledged her with a brief nod. Others acted as if she didn't exist at all. A few made jokes in front of their colleagues, using her as entertainment to break up the monotony of their evening work sessions. "Maria, right?" called out a voice from behind her. She turned to see Jake, one of the younger executives from the international development team. He was in his late 20s, confident in the way that came from never having to struggle for anything. "Important in life." "Yes, sir," Maria replied politely. "Listen, could you be extra careful around my desk tonight? I've got some really important documents spread out, and I can't afford to have anything moved around or damaged." He spoke to her, as if she were a child who might accidentally color outside the lines. The condescending tone was subtle but unmistakable. "Of course I will be very careful," Maria assured him. Jake nodded and turned back to his work, immediately dismissing her from his attention. But as Maria began cleaning around his desk, she couldn't help but notice the documents he was so worried about. They were contract proposals for a major deal with a German manufacturing company. The language was formal and technical, full of legal terminology and business jargon. And it was all wrong. The cultural tone was completely inappropriate for German business standards. The formal address structures were mixed up. Several key phrases had been translated literally from English, resulting in meanings that would actually be considered insulting in German business culture. Maria recognized the company name from the letterhead. She had worked with them before, many years ago in what felt like another lifetime. She knew their corporate culture, their expectations, their preferences. She could fix these problems in about 10 minutes. But to Jake and everyone else in this building, she was just an old woman with a mop and a bucket, struggling to communicate in broken English. As she finished her work for the night and prepared to catch the last bus home, Maria reflected on the strange contradiction of her life. During the day, she was a grandmother helping her daughter raise two beautiful children, cooking traditional meals and sharing stories of the old country. At night, she was invisible, moving through a world of million-dollar deals and international business while people assumed she couldn't even read the language properly. But tomorrow would be another night, another shift, another opportunity to listen and learn and remain invisible. Because sometimes, Maria had discovered, being underestimated was the most powerful position of all. She just didn't know yet how powerful it would prove to be. 3 weeks had passed since Maria first overheard the conversation about the German contract problems. Nothing had changed. The same young executive still worked late into the night, still complained about international clients, and still treated her like a piece of furniture that happened to move around and clean things. But tonight was different. Tonight, the tension in the office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maria arrived at her usual time, 10:45 p.m., and immediately sensed that something was wrong. The security guard barely nodded when she walked through the lobby. Upstairs, more people than usual were still at their desks, their faces tight with stress and frustration. As she began her cleaning routine on the 15th floor, Maria could hear raised voices coming from the main conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see a group of executives huddled around a laptop screen, gesturing wildly at charts and documents spread across the large table. "This is a disaster," one of them was saying loud enough for the words to carry into the hallway. "The Germans are threatening to pull out completely." Maria pushed her cleaning cart closer to the conference room, not because she was trying to eavesdrop, but because that area needed to be cleaned anyway. At least that's what she told herself. Jake was in the room, looking more frustrated than she had ever seen him. His usually perfect hair was messy from running his hands through it, and his expensive shirt was wrinkled. He was pointing aggressively at the laptop screen. "I don't understand what went wrong," he was saying to his colleagues. "We followed the template exactly. We used the same format that worked with the French clients last month." An older woman, with silver hair, who Maria recognized as the department director, shook her head grimly. "German business culture is completely different from French culture, Jake. What works in Paris can be insulting in Munich." "Well, how were we supposed to know that?" Jake shot back, his voice rising. "Nobody told us about these cultural differences." Maria continued cleaning around the conference room, moving slowly and quietly. She had perfected the art of being invisible, and her cleaning duties gave her the perfect excuse to be nearby during important conversations. "The damage might already be done," the director continued. "Klaus Hoffmann called me personally this afternoon. He said our latest proposal was, quote, culturally insensitive and professionally inappropriate." Those were his exact words. Jake slumped into his chair. "Great. So we've managed to insult a $50 million client because of some cultural misunderstanding." "It's not just cultural," added another executive, a man in his 40s who always wore overly bright ties. "Our legal department says the contract language we used is completely wrong for German business law. Apparently some of the phrases we thought were polite actually have negative legal implications in Germany." Maria's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth. She knew exactly what they were talking about. German contract language was very specific, very formal, and completely different from American business writing. The phrases they had probably used would indeed be inappropriate, possibly even offensive to German business professionals. "And now," the director said with a heavy sigh, "we have exactly 48 hours to fix this mess, or Klaus Hoffmann and his company are walking away from the deal permanently." 48 hours. Jake's voice cracked slightly. "How are we supposed to find someone who understands German business culture and contract law in 48 hours? It's almost 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night." The room fell silent for a moment. Maria could see the desperation on their faces, the realization that they were in over their heads with no clear solution in sight. "What about that translation service we used last time?" suggested the man with the bright tie. "Already tried them," the director replied. "They can translate the words, but they can't fix the cultural problems. We need someone who actually understands how German business works, not just someone who speaks the language." Maria finished cleaning the area around the conference room and moved on to the nearby cubicles, but her mind was racing. Everything they were describing, the cultural misunderstandings, the legal language problems, the formal communication issues, these were exactly the kinds of problems she had solved hundreds of times in her previous life. As she emptied trash, bins, and wiped down desks, Maria found herself mentally composing the kind of letter that would not only solve their immediate crisis, but actually impress Klaus Hoffmann and his team. She knew the proper formal address structure for German business correspondence. She understood the subtle differences between various levels of professional courtesy. She even knew Klaus Hoffmann's company personally. She had worked with them on 3 different projects back when she was still Dr. Maria Santos Weber, professor of international linguistics. But she was just the cleaning lady now. The old woman with broken English who emptied their trash and stayed invisible. The irony was almost painful. As the night wore on, the situation seemed to get worse rather than better. More executives arrived, called in from their homes to help with the crisis. The conference room filled with expensive suits and desperate energy, but no real solutions. Maria watched it all unfold as she worked. She saw Jake make increasingly frantic phone calls to translation services, only to hang up, in frustration when they couldn't provide the specific cultural expertise he needed. She heard the director explain to someone on the phone, probably her boss, that the company was about to lose one of their biggest international deals because of a communication breakdown. Around midnight, things reached a breaking point. Jake stormed out of the conference room, his face red with anger and frustration. He wasn't watching where he was going, and he crashed directly into Maria's cleaning cart. Bottles of cleaning supplies went flying, and her carefully organized equipment scattered across the floor. "Are you kidding me?" Jake exploded, his professional composure finally cracking completely. "This is exactly what I don't need right now." Maria immediately began picking up the spilled supplies, apologizing quietly. So sorry. I will clean this up right away." But Jake wasn't finished. The stress of the evening, the pressure of the failing deal, and his own sense of helplessness all came pouring out in a torrent of words. "Do you have any idea what's going on here?" he said, gesturing wildly at the conference room full of panicking executives. "We're about to lose millions of dollars because we can't communicate properly with our German clients. Millions. And I have to deal with—" He gestured dismissively at Maria, and the cleaning supplies scattered on the floor. Other employees had started to gather, drawn by the commotion. Maria could feel their eyes on her as she continued to pick up the spilled bottles, her face burning with embarrassment. "Maybe she should take English lessons," someone said with a sneer, though Maria couldn't see who had spoken. "Or maybe she should just be more careful," added another voice. "Some of us are trying to work here." Jake nodded in agreement, still breathing hard from his outburst. "Exactly. I mean, how hard is it to stay out of the way? We're dealing with international business here, complex cultural issues that require real education and expertise. Not everyone can understand this kind of work." The words hit Maria like physical blows, not because they were cruel, though they certainly were, but because they revealed just how completely these people had misjudged her. They saw her age, her accent, her cleaning uniform, and they assumed they knew everything about her capabilities and intelligence. "I am very sorry," Maria said again, her voice steady despite the humiliation. "It will not happen again." She finished collecting her supplies and quietly pushed her cart away from the group. Behind her, she could hear them returning to their frantic discussions about the German crisis, already dismissing her from their thoughts. But as Maria continued her work, something had changed inside her. For 3 years, she had accepted their dismissiveness, their condescension, their casual cruelty. She had told herself that this job was temporary, that she just needed to support her family until something better came along. Tonight, though, as she listened to them struggle with problems she could solve in her sleep, Maria began to wonder if staying invisible was really the best strategy after all. The German contract crisis was getting worse by the hour, and Maria Santos, the invisible cleaning lady with 17 languages hidden behind her broken English, was starting to think it might be time to become visible again, whether they were ready for it or not. The next evening, Maria arrived at Global Tech to find the building buzzing with an energy she had never felt before. It wasn't the usual calm of night shift workers finishing up their daily tasks. This was pure panic. Security guards were running between floors. Delivery drivers brought in boxes of takeout food at all hours. The parking garage, usually empty by 8 p.m., was packed with expensive cars belonging to executives who should have been home with their families. As Maria stepped off the elevator on the 15th floor, she could immediately see why. Every light in the building seemed to be on. Conference rooms that were normally dark and empty were filled with people hunched over laptops and surrounded by stacks of papers. The main boardroom, which Maria usually cleaned in peaceful silence, was packed with the company's top executives, and at the center of it all was Robert Chen, the CEO himself. Maria had only seen Mr. Chen a handful of times in her 3 years at the company. He was the kind of executive who worked from corner offices on the top floor, far removed from the daily operations where cleaning staff might encounter him. But tonight, he was right here on the 15th floor, his usually perfect suit wrinkled and his face showing the strain of whatever crisis had brought him down from his executive tower. 36 hours, she heard him saying as she began her cleaning routine near the boardroom. His voice carried through the glass walls, sharp with urgency. "That's all we have left. 36 hours to save this deal or we lose everything. Maria pushed her cart closer, moving slowly and quietly. Through the transparent walls, she could see a dozen of the company's most senior people gathered around the massive conference table. Charts and graphs covered every surface. Multiple laptops displayed video calls with people in other time zones. And in the center of it all was a thick stack of papers that Maria recognized immediately. The German contract that had been causing so much trouble. Klaus Hoffmann called again this morning, said the director of international business, the same silver-haired woman Maria had seen struggling with this problem for weeks. He's giving us one final chance to submit a culturally appropriate proposal. If we get it wrong this time, his company is walking away permanently. Jake was there too, looking even more stressed than he had the night before when he had knocked over Maria's cleaning cart. His usually confident demeanor was completely gone, replaced by the desperate look of someone who knew his career was on the line. "What about the consultant we hired?" Jake asked, his voice tight. "The one who supposedly specializes in German business culture?" Mr. Chen's expression darkened. "She reviewed our proposal this afternoon. According to her, we've made so many cultural mistakes that starting over would be easier than trying to fix what we have. But starting over means missing our deadline." The room fell silent except for the soft clicking of Maria's cleaning supplies as she worked around the periphery. She moved like a ghost, invisible to the people whose entire professional world was crashing down around them. "There has to be someone else," said another executive, a man Maria recognized from the legal department. "Some expert who understands both German business law and cultural expectations." "At this point, we'd need a miracle," Mr. Chen replied grimly. "We need someone who not only speaks fluent German but actually understands how German corporate culture works. Someone who knows their legal system, their business etiquette, their communication style. And we need them tonight." Maria's hands trembled slightly as she wiped down a nearby desk. She knew she should keep moving, should stay invisible as she had for 3 years. But listening to their desperation was becoming physically painful. These people were talking about losing millions of dollars, about hundreds of jobs that might be cut if this deal fell through. They were describing problems that she could solve before her shift ended tonight. But they saw her as nothing more than an old cleaning woman who could barely speak English. "What about universities?" suggested someone from the back of the room. "Maybe there's a professor somewhere who specializes in German business practices." "I already called 3 universities," Jake replied wearily. "Everyone who might be qualified is either unavailable, doesn't have the specific expertise we need, or can't work on our timeline." Maria finished cleaning the area immediately around the boardroom and moved to the nearby cubicles. But her mind wasn't on her work anymore. She was thinking about Klaus Hoffmann, about his company's corporate culture, about the specific legal requirements that German businesses expected in international contracts. She was thinking about the years she had spent working with companies exactly like his, solving exactly these kinds of problems. She was thinking about the stack of degrees gathering dust in her small apartment, certificates and awards that proved she was once considered one of the best linguistic consultants in Europe. Most of all, she was thinking about her granddaughter, Isabella, who had asked her just last week why she came home so tired and sad every night. "Because, Mija," Maria had told her, "sometimes we have to do jobs that are different from what we dreamed of doing." "But why don't you do what you dreamed of?" Isabella had asked with the innocent directness that only children possessed. Maria hadn't known how to answer that question then. But tonight, listening to these executives struggle with a problem she could solve, she was beginning to understand that maybe she had been asking herself the wrong question all along. The question wasn't whether she was qualified to help them. She was more than qualified. The question was whether she had the courage to step out of the shadows and reveal who she really was. Around 2 a.m., things got even worse. Maria was cleaning the executive break room when she heard shouting coming from the boardroom. Through the glass walls, she could see Mr. Chen on a video call with what appeared to be the German executives. Even without being able to hear the specific words, Maria could tell from the body language that the conversation was not going well. Klaus Hoffmann's face filled the laptop screen, his expression stern and unforgiving. He was speaking in rapid German, his tone formal and cold. The automatic translation software that the company was using struggled to keep up, producing subtitles that Maria could see were completely wrong. Jake was frantically taking notes, trying to respond to points that were being mistranslated in real time. The other executives looked on helplessly as their last chance to save the deal slowly slipped away. Finally, Klaus Hoffmann said something that made everyone in the room freeze. Even with the poor translation, the meaning was clear. This was their final warning. Get it right by tomorrow evening or the partnership was over. The video call ended, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. Maria watched as Mr. Chen slumped into his chair, the weight of the company's future pressing down on his shoulders. Around the table, some of the most successful business people in the city looked defeated. "That's it," Mr. Chen said quietly. "Unless we can find a miracle in the next 18 hours, we're done. Maybe we should just accept that this isn't going to work," suggested Jake, his voice hollow. "Cut our losses and move on." "Move on to what?" snapped the silver-haired director. "This deal represents 30% of our projected revenue for next year. If we lose it, we'll have to lay off half our international division." The room fell silent again. Maria continued her cleaning, but her movements had become automatic. Her mind was entirely focused on the crisis unfolding just a few feet away from her. She thought about the hundreds of people who worked in this building, many of them good people who treated her with kindness and respect. She thought about Tony, the security guard who always asked about her family. She thought about the young woman in accounting who had once helped Maria when she was confused about her payroll paperwork. Most of all, she thought about Klaus Hoffmann and his team, who weren't unreasonable people demanding impossible things. They were simply asking for the respect and cultural understanding that any international business partnership required. And she thought about herself, Dr. Maria Santos Weber, who had once been considered one of Europe's leading experts in cross-cultural business communication, reduced to emptying trash bins and pretending not to understand the very problems she had built her career solving. As the executives filed out of the boardroom, their faces grim with defeat, Maria made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow night she would still be Maria Santos, the night shift cleaning lady, but she would also be something else. She would be the miracle they were looking for. The next evening, Maria arrived at Global Tech 30 minutes earlier than usual. Her hands shook slightly as she signed in with the security guard, but her resolve was firm. Tonight, after 3 years of silence, she was going to speak. The building felt different as she rode the elevator to the 15th floor. The same desperate energy from the night before still filled the air, but now there was something else, a sense of finality. This was their last chance. As the elevator doors opened, Maria could hear voices coming from every direction. The main boardroom was packed again, but now there were people spilling out into the hallways, huddled around laptops and tablets, making frantic phone calls in multiple languages. She had never seen the office in such chaos. Mr. Chen was standing in the center of the boardroom, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened. Dark circles under his eyes showed that he probably hadn't slept at all. Around him, the same group of executives from the night before looked even more defeated than before. 6 hours, Mr. Chen was saying as Maria began setting up her cleaning supplies nearby. Klaus Hoffmann expects our final proposal by 6 a.m. German time. That's midnight here. 6 hours to save this company. Maria pushed her cart closer to the boardroom, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. But the executives were too focused on their crisis to notice one cleaning lady moving around the periphery of their emergency meeting. The translation service called back, Jake reported, his voice flat with exhaustion. They can have a basic German translation ready by 11 p.m., but they can't guarantee the cultural accuracy. Their exact words were, "We translate words, not meaning." "That's not good enough," said the silver-haired director. After yesterday's video call, Klaus made it clear that another cultural mistake would end everything permanently. Maria stopped, moving. This was the moment she had been preparing for all day. She had practiced the words during her bus ride to work, had rehearsed exactly what she would say, but now, standing just outside the glass walls of the boardroom, she felt frozen. These people had spent 3 years treating her as if she were invisible, as if her broken English meant she had broken thoughts. Jake had publicly humiliated her, just 2 nights ago. Many of them had laughed at her accent, made jokes about her intelligence, dismissed her as nothing more than an old immigrant woman who couldn't even speak proper English. Why should she help them now? But then she heard Mr. Chen continue speaking and her hesitation disappeared. "I got off the phone with HR 20 minutes ago," he was saying, his voice heavy with defeat. "If we lose this deal, we'll have to let go of 430 people. That's nearly half our workforce. Good people who have family, has mortgages, children in college. 430 people. Maria thought about Tony, the security guard, who had always been kind to her. She thought about the young woman in accounting who had helped her with her paperwork. She thought about all the night shift workers, custodians, security staff, maintenance crews, who would be the first to lose their jobs if the company started cutting costs. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real people whose lives would be destroyed because a group of executives couldn't figure out how to communicate properly with their German partners. Maria took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the boardroom door. Her hand trembled as she knocked softly on the glass. Every head in the room turned toward her. The conversation stopped completely. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of air conditioning and the distant noise of traffic from the street far below. Mr. Chen looked puzzled. In 3 years, the cleaning staff had never interrupted an executive meeting. Ever. "I am sorry to bother you," Maria said, her voice quiet but clear. Her accent was still there, but something about her tone was different. More confident, more purposeful. It's fine," Mr. Chen replied, clearly confused. "But we're in the middle of an important meeting. Can this wait until later?" Maria shook her head. "No, sir. I think maybe I can help you." Jake let out a short laugh, but it wasn't cruel. Just the automatic response of someone too exhausted to think clearly. "Help us? No offense, but this is a pretty complex business situation." "Yes," Maria said simply. "I know." She stepped fully into the boardroom, her cleaning uniform looking strangely out of place among the expensive suits and polished conference table. But her posture was different now. Straighter, more assured. "You are having trouble with Klaus Hoffmann and Deutsche Innovation Group," she continued, her English still accented but suddenly much more precise. "The cultural problems with your contract proposal." The room fell completely silent. Mr. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion but with curiosity. "How do you know about Klaus Hoffmann?" he asked. Maria smiled, and for the first time, in 3 years, it wasn't the apologetic smile of someone trying to stay invisible. It was the confident smile of someone who knew exactly what she was talking about. "Because," she said, and then she switched to perfect, fluent German. "I have worked with Klaus Hoffmann's company before. 3 times, actually. And I know exactly why your proposals have been rejected." The silence that followed was so complete that Maria could hear her own heartbeat. Every person in the room was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to complete disbelief. Jake's mouth was literally hanging open. You speak German?" Mr. Chen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Fluently," Maria replied, switching back to English that was suddenly much more polished than anyone in the room had ever heard from her. "Along with French, Italian, Portuguese, Dutch, Swedish, Russian, Mandarin, Japanese, Arabic, and 7 other languages." She paused, watching as the implications of what she had just said began to sink in around the room. "My name is Dr. Maria Santos Weber," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I have a doctorate in international linguistics from Universidad Complutense Madrid and a master's degree in cross-cultural business communication from the London School of Economics. For 15 years, I worked as a senior consultant for the European Union, specializing in exactly the kind of cultural and linguistic challenges you are facing with Deutsche Innovation Group." The boardroom had become so quiet that Maria could hear the distant sound of elevators moving between floors. Mr. Chen was staring at her as if she had just announced she was from another planet. But you're..." Jake started to say, then stopped, apparently unable to figure out how to finish the sentence. "I'm the cleaning lady," Maria said, not unkindly. "Yes. For the past 3 years, that's exactly what I've been. Because sometimes life forces us to take jobs that are different from our qualifications. Because sometimes we do what we must to survive and support our families." She looked around the room, making eye contact with each of the executives who had spent 3 years dismissing her intelligence. "But tonight," she continued, "I'm offering to be something else. I'm offering to be the miracle you said you needed." Mr. Chen found his voice first. You can really solve our problem with the German contract?" Maria nodded. "Not only can I solve it, but I can have Klaus Hoffmann so impressed with your cultural understanding and linguistic precision that he'll be eager to expand the partnership beyond what you originally proposed." She paused, letting that promise sink in. "I know Klaus personally. I know his company's corporate culture, their legal requirements, their communication preferences. I know exactly what went wrong with your previous proposals, and I know exactly how to fix it." The room erupted in whispers and murmurs as the executives tried to process what they had just learned. Maria stood calmly in the center of it all, no longer the invisible cleaning lady, but a highly qualified professional offering to save their company. Mr. Chen raised his hand for silence, and the room immediately quieted. "Dr. Santos Weber," he said, testing out her real title for the first time. "If what you're saying is true, if you can really solve this crisis, then we need to talk. Right now." Maria smiled. "Yes, Mr. Chen. I believe we do." The next 4 hours transformed Maria from an invisible cleaning lady into the most important person at Global Tech Industries. Mr. Chen immediately cleared the boardroom, asking everyone except Maria and 2 senior executives to leave. Within minutes, she was sitting at the head of the massive conference table, the same table she had cleaned hundreds of times, reviewing the contract proposals that had caused so much trouble. "This is the problem," Maria said, pointing to the second paragraph of the document. She had traded her cleaning uniform for a business suit that the company's executive assistant had somehow found in the middle of the night. In German business culture, this phrase suggests that you consider their company to be subordinate to yours. It's accidentally insulting. Jake, who was taking notes frantically, looked up with confusion. But the translation service said that phrase meant cooperative partnership. In American English, yes, Maria explained patiently. But direct translation misses the cultural context. In formal German business communication, the specific words you choose indicate the level of respect and equality you're offering. What you wrote suggests a relationship where they work for you, not with you. Mr. Chen leaned forward, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. "Can you fix it?" "I already have," Maria replied, pulling out a laptop that the IT department had set up for her. "But that's just the beginning. The entire structure of your proposal is wrong for German business expectations." As she worked, Maria explained each change she was making. The formal address structure needed to acknowledge Klaus Hoffmann's specific title and position within his company's hierarchy. The legal language required precise terminology that conveyed respect for German corporate law. Even the order in which topics were presented needed to follow German business customs. "In Germany," she said as she rewrote a section about financial terms, "you always discuss the philosophical foundation of the partnership before you get into specific numbers. Americans like to start with the bottom line, but Germans need to understand the broader vision first." The transformation wasn't just in the document, it was in the room itself. These executives who had treated Maria as invisible for 3 years were now hanging on her every word, asking detailed questions about German culture, taking notes on everything she said. Around 4 a.m., Maria finished the new proposal and moved on to preparing talking points for the video call with Klaus Hoffmann. "Mr. Chen," she said, "I need to ask you something important. When you speak with Klaus tomorrow, today I mean, you'll need to apologize for the previous proposals. Not just the errors, but for the cultural insensitivity they showed." Mr. Chen nodded. "Of course, how should I phrase it?" "You don't understand," Maria said gently. "The apology needs to be in German, and it needs to use very specific language that shows you understand exactly what went wrong." If you apologize in English, even with translation, it won't carry the same weight. But I don't speak German, Mr. Chen replied. Maria smiled. I know. That's why I'm going to teach you the exact words to say, with the proper pronunciation. And I'm going to be right here during the call to help with any communication issues that come up. For the next hour, Maria worked with Mr. Chen on his pronunciation, helping him understand not just what to say but how to say it with the right tone and inflection. She taught him the subtle differences between formal and informal German address, explaining when to use each form. Jake, who had been quiet for most of the night, finally spoke up. Maria, Dr. Santos Weber, I owe you an apology. Maria looked at him calmly. For what, specifically? For the way I treated you, for the things I said, for assuming that because your English wasn't perfect, you weren't intelligent. His voice was quiet, genuinely ashamed. I was completely wrong and I'm sorry. Jake, Maria replied, your apology is accepted, but I want you to remember this feeling. Remember how wrong you were about me, and think about how you might be wrong about other people you dismissed too quickly. At 5:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the crucial video call with Klaus Hoffmann, Maria made a suggestion that surprised everyone. Mr. Chen, I think you should let me speak to Klaus first. In German. Let me explain who I am and what changes we've made to the proposal. Mr. Chen hesitated. But won't he be confused about why our linguistic consultant is an elderly woman who works as a janitor? Maria finished with a smile. Trust me, Klaus will be more impressed than confused. Germans respect education and expertise above everything else. When he learns that your company employs someone with my qualifications, even in an unconventional role, it will actually strengthen his respect for global tech. At exactly 6 a.m. German time, the video call began. Klaus Hoffmann appeared on the screen, his expression stern and formal. He was clearly prepared to deliver bad news to officially end the partnership negotiations, but instead of Mr. Chen's face, he saw Maria. Guten Morgen, Herr Hoffmann, Maria said in perfect German, her accent flawless and her tone carrying exactly the right level of professional respect. I am Dr. Maria Santos Weber, and I believe we have met before. Klaus's expression shifted, from stern to surprised to delighted as recognition dawned on his face. Dr. Santos Weber, he replied in German, his whole demeanor changing. But of course I remember you. You consulted on the Hamburg port project in 2018. Your cultural analysis saved that entire negotiation. Indeed, Maria replied, still in German. And I'm calling today because I believe I can help save this negotiation as well. What followed was a 20-minute conversation in rapid German that left the American executives watching in amazement. Maria explained the cultural mistakes in the previous proposals, presented the corrected version, and outlined a framework for moving forward that addressed every concern Klaus had raised. By the time she switched back to English and invited Mr. Chen to join the conversation, Klaus Hoffmann was practically glowing with enthusiasm. Mr. Chen, Klaus said in heavily accented but clear English, I must say I am extremely impressed. Having someone of Dr. Santos Weber's caliber working with your company shows a level of international sophistication that we had not previously recognized. The call ended 45 minutes later with Klaus Hoffmann not only agreeing to the original deal, but proposing an expanded partnership that would be worth nearly twice the original contract value. As soon as the video call ended, the boardroom erupted in celebration, but in the middle of the chaos, Mr. Chen raised his hand for silence. Dr. Santos Weber, he said formally, I need to ask you something. Would you consider joining Global Tech as our Director of International Communications? At a salary commensurate with your qualifications and experience? Maria was quiet for a moment, thinking about her 3 years of emptying trash bins and being invisible. Then she thought about Isabella, her granddaughter, who had asked why she didn't do what she dreamed of doing. Yes, she said simply. I would be honored. 6 months later, Maria's transformation was complete. Her new office was on the 22nd floor with a view of the entire city. The international communications department that she had built from scratch now employed 12 people and handled partnerships in over 30 countries. But every few weeks, she still took the elevator down to the 15th floor to visit the custodial staff. She made sure they were treated with respect, that their contributions were valued, that no one assumed their worth based on their job title or their accent. And sometimes, late at night when the office was quiet, she would remember the feeling of being invisible, not because it was a time she wanted to forget, but because it had taught her something important about the hidden talents that exist in every workplace, in every community, in every person who gets dismissed too quickly. Jake, who now worked directly under Maria in the international department, often said that the most valuable lesson he learned that night wasn't about German business culture or cross-cultural communication. It was about the danger of judging people by their appearance, their accent, or their circumstances rather than taking the time to discover who they really are. Because sometimes the person emptying your trash bin might just be the miracle you've been looking for.